Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us at today's virtual roundtable, Reframing Civic Engagement. My name is Jackie Garrow, and I'm the impact producer for the Hot Docs Citizen Minutes short film series. The Hot Docs Citizen Minutes short film series is a collection of documentaries commissioned by Hot Docs, featuring ordinary folks doing extraordinary things to affect change in their communities across the country. There are 15 short films in the collection, 8 which launched during the pandemic, and 7 which just recently had their world premiere at the Hot Docs International Festival in May. Each of the 15 films has a different director. We felt that this week, Citizenship Week, was a fitting time to discuss civic engagement. Civic engagement, what does that mean to different people, and what does that mean to different communities? Before I introduce you to today's host and our wonderful guest speakers and changemakers, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. I would like to thank and acknowledge the original stewards of this land that we occupy as settlers and where this event is being produced. Toronto, or Takaranto, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. And it is now and always will be the home of many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. On behalf of Hot Docs, we welcome you to this virtual space, and we invite you to reflect on the history of the land where you're watching from and your relationship to it. And now I'm really excited to introduce you to our host for the day and to our wonderful change makers who are all featured in the Citizen Minutes Series 2. This part of the recording has actually been done after the fact because we had a small glitch on the day of the event with our first 5 minutes where we lost the wonderful introductions by each of our panelists and our host. So I will introduce them now, and then we'll have an opportunity to watch a short clip from each of the films they're featured in after I introduce them. So our host for today is John Beebe. John is the founder of the Toronto Metropolitan University Democratic Engagement Exchange. John has been a champion and an ally of the Citizen Minutes short film series from the get-go. He and his team at the TMU Democratic Engagement Exchange created a wonderful community toolkit for the first series of films, and they will be doing so again for the second series of films. And you can find those community toolkits that accompany the films on citizenminutes.ca. So we're delighted to have John. Thanks for being here today to host our conversation. And our wonderful guest speakers, we have Misbah Rao. Misbah is featured in the short film Sisterhood Softball, which was directed by Faria Ahmed. Misbah is a third base person in the Sisterhood Softball League. She's also the founder of Crescent Sports, a nonprofit providing opportunities for girls and women from underrepresented communities. She's a teacher, she's a mom, and she's currently immersed in studying nursing. And now we'll watch a clip from Sisterhood Softball.
People in your community who will stand by your side at a drop of a pin. Anytime you need somebody, any kind of support you need, you are not alone. At SSL, over and over again, we build women up. The most important piece of the puzzle, which I think you'd only understand if you were on the field, was that we're not just about the softball. From the get-go, it was about empowering women. It was about building a sisterhood, building almost like a tribe of women that were there for each other, not just on the field, but in life. And this is beautiful and important because Sisterhood Softball is made up of a lot of women who are immigrants. They have left their loved ones and their families behind. When you don't have a support system and you don't have people you can call and rely on during times of hardship and difficulty, or even somebody to celebrate when something good happens, it really takes away from the human experience. And Sisterhood Softball brought that back for so many women.
Our next guest speaker is Ingrid Buday, the founder of the No More Noise Toronto campaign. Ingrid is featured in the Do You Hear What I Hear short film directed by Kat Mills. And now we'll take a moment to watch a clip from Do You Hear What I Hear so you can get to know Ingrid a little bit better.
I did move motions on behalf of people that are very concerned, awake at 2 and 3 and 4 in the middle of the night. They made requests, they phoned 311, they called my office, they wrote, I sent everything in, I made motions, and there is an enforcement blitz at Don Valley and Lakeshore, where not a single person actually lives.
The complaints about it are building and building and building, and it's not going to go away until you're really putting the full force on it.
I would say the City of Toronto acknowledges that it's a problem, but what they're willing to do about it is another question.
There's also tarts at the back. That I've been advised that there's tarts at the back if you need some sugar, and I also
What
have
does that have to
chocolates.
do with noise?
Frustrated by a lack of enforcement and a poor reporting system, Ingrid has made her own website to log noise reports. She plans to present her data to City Hall during the noise bylaw review.
All of these points are logged noise reports. I take measurements at people's homes, and they really are appreciative. It lets people know they aren't nuts. They're like, why is this making me so angry? Well, it's because you have over 23 noise spikes at night of over 80 decibels. I'm creating that community across the city so that when it comes time for the noise bylaws to be reviewed, we're ready.
I think the city can definitely do more.
We can let the city know how important this is.
Who makes history, one person or the masses? We need a lot of unity to change the world.
Nothing changes unless people do something. And so I'm doing something. And that's going to make change.
And last but not least, the wonderful and talented Janelle Niles, comedian, founder of the Gotland touring stand-up comedy variety show. Janelle is featured in the self-titled short documentary Janelle Niles Inconvenient, which is directed by Cass Gardner and Kelly Zemnikas. And now we'll have a moment to enjoy a clip from Janelle Niles Inconvenient.
Do you remember the conversation that we had? We were sitting at the diner and you were telling me how you were having trouble getting onto different shows in Ottawa because people didn't see your potential. But I saw your potential and I said, Janelle, listen, if they're not gonna let you sit at their table, make your own table.
Hole, hole! Where are my people at? Anyone who's Anishinaabe, make some noise! So Gotland is an Indigenous comedy show where we express solidarity through humor and we tackle tough topics. Some people say that I get a little too political up here, that I make white people uncomfortable. White people, are you uncomfortable? Not yet, no. I will try harder. I decided to create Gotland when I noticed there was only a couple token Indians, if you will. So I have a lot of Indigenous jokes, but I'm in the nation's capital. Where are our people? And that's how you take it back. That's how you take it back. Cheers, everybody. Cheers for Gotland Indigenous Comedy Show. I know that's weird. I get asked all the time, Janelle, isn't it weird that you're an Indigenous woman and you're drinking on stage? And I tell them, no, because this isn't alcohol. This is fresh tap water from Clear Lake First Nation.
And that's it for our clips. I'm now going to turn it over to John Beebe, your moderator for the day, and you're going to be plunged right into a conversation that John was having with the changemakers about risk-taking and boundary breaking and their relationship to those two notions and where it all began for them. So enjoy the conversation, and I will see you again at the end. Thank you for being here.
Of taking risks and breaking boundaries, or was it something that just sort of came to you through your passions? Misbah, start with you and the work I know you've done in sports that go beyond just what we've seen in the film here, but if you can talk a little bit about that work.
Okay. So I think for me, it kind of just happened organically. But I would say like my whole life, whenever I see something that I don't particularly like, I've always tried to make a difference or change it if I'm able to. But when it came to sports has been a passion of mine since I was a kid. My dad put me in a lot of different sports. I played a lot of different sports, and we're originally from the States, so we moved here when I was 10, and that was my first exposure to like hockey and the culture here, which is like different than in America. It's, I feel like, more basketball. Like there's just, and maybe like baseball and stuff like that. And I found that, and I wasn't I didn't always wear like a headscarf or anything like that. So when I entered more into like the Muslim community, I saw that there were gaps when it came to particularly sports with Muslim girls and women. And I felt like there were so many benefits that sport gave me and it gives individuals. There's so much research to back that up. And a lot of it has to do with, lifelong skills. So I found that when I started my non-for-profit organization, that like Muslim girls in particular and Muslim women, they're like 10 years behind when it comes to, especially the girls, 10 years behind when it comes to sports, because there's a lot of different issues and stigma that they face that that other communities don't. So I made it a mission, being a mom to 3 young girls as well, that I wanted to have that impact, and it aligned with the passion I already possessed. So it kind of just that's how like it drives my work that way. So pretty, yeah.
And for you, does it feel like, that there were barriers that you had to break through in your work?
No, for sure. So one of the biggest barriers is that I don't know why, but wearing something or practicing a faith, being a visible practicing of any faith, that there are certain stereotypes or people assume, especially when it comes, I think, to Muslim women. I don't know, I can't speak on other communities. And I think that then seeing women competing and performing at a high level is something that is not shown in the mainstream media. With the tournaments and events that I've done. So I do programming for 18 plus, and then I do programming from like 5 years and plus. So like for the younger kids, it's more about getting them active and getting to love the sport and seeing themselves represented by, so all the people leading the programming are women from all different faiths and all different backgrounds, but it's a women-led organization and it's for women. So the girls to see that, and how you talk to girls is so different than how you talk to boys. For girls, it's a lot to do more with like self-esteem and like building their ability to, they can do this, whether they're going to play at a high level. And then for the older girls who want to compete, we're trying to give them an opportunity, try to give them a platform to be able to do that with our middle-aged girls. And then for older women, like people who no longer play competitively, we've set up environments so then if they want to play without their headscarf or they want to compete at a very high level, they're able to do that. And we're trying to feature them and highlight them because they exist in the community, but because it's not in the forefront of media, people are always surprised when they see. But I have so many friends who have played sports with and without the headscarf, with the faith, not with the, at a very, very high level, but it's just not something that you see. So I think the biggest thing is that showing people that we are there, and being a non-for-profit and, applying for grants and stuff, like when people see there's a need, then they're willing to, help out. But it's just, even just seeing people who look like us, who have traditionally been left out of the sports world, being featured is something positive for the next generation.
Yeah, it's amazing, like, and that sense of being seen, like just changing, being seen. Yeah. Ingrid, you've literally taken on City Hall here with this. I mean, is that always been your mode, or like, in terms of like, again, like most of us, we intimidated to go up to literally take on City Hall. What drove you to take that risk, to push those boundaries there?
I guess I've always been a bit of an adventurer and willing to try new things, and this is certainly a new thing for me. But when I met Daniela, I realized that she actually has no choice and must take risks every day in just living her life. And then through Hot Docs, I love the documentaries, and I saw the documentary on Navalny. And he's, for those of you who don't know, he's a Russian opposition leader, lawyer, and anti-corruption activist who's now in jail in Russia. But he said, bad things happen when good people do nothing. And that just really resonated with me. And it also reframed the way I take risks. As a play on return ROI, or return on investment analysis, I did an ROR, return on risk, and analysis, and decided that it was worth the risk taking on urban noise, and that it would be worth the return. I've always felt that I have agency, and so I felt this was the right time. There's an opportunity which lowered the risk and increased the potential return. And so I didn't know that this would necessarily lead to City Hall. I knew that there was a bylaw review, but I was always willing to stay in the background. But when you are loud, when you're outspoken, guess what? You end up on stage, and Janelle knows that as well. So, it's the way this is built and then the way this is going. And I just absolutely think that we need to make some changes in our lives. And so I'm willing to take that risk.
That's great. But Janelle, you talk about it in the film. You talk about the risk taking and being up. I mean, I even no matter what the circumstances, anybody willing to step on stage and just be the sole person trying to make a room laugh, that's incredible. So can you talk a little bit about what that has meant for you and what drove you to take those kind of risks in your work and this path you've chosen?
Thank you, John. I think I was always a risk taker because I was born political. I was born into a family in the past had fighters for the civil rights movement. My great grandma Dorothy Marsman and her brother Lauren Marsman. They actually won a Centennial Medal for their hard work back in Nova Scotia, where I'm from. And I find through my whole life we've been fighting the good fight. And some people they'll write a song or they'll do a painting, but I bring my fight to the stage. And if I can make them laugh, I got them. I got them. I can get them on our side, and that's what I do. I express solidarity through humor, and what Canada doesn't know, then we will teach through comedy, because apparently a lot of people didn't learn this stuff, Indigenous culture, in school, or they weren't paying attention to the grade 9 history class. So every second I take on stage is a risk, but it's a risk I'm willing to take.
I want to build on some of the themes that we even talked about in those short clips here. And Misbah, one of the things was said in the film is, you are not alone, right? And it's community, and we see a sense of community there. So can you talk about what community has meant to your work, why that's so critical to the sports, and how sports in particular have helped to build community? Like, why is that an effective tool, or an effective tool as a sounds, mechanism or way to build community?
Okay. Like 3 questions in there. I'm going to try to target each one slowly. All right. I'll start off with how sports builds community and why it's such a vehicle for it. So I think that there are certain things that players who play sports, they go through. The first time that you learn something new, there's a sense of apprehension. Then there's a climb to get skilled at something, and it takes dedication and work. And then to have somebody who understands that struggle they've gone through it to play the sport at whatever level they play at, there's a learning curve and there's time and effort that's involved. And to have people doing the same work as you, that automatically binds you, and to have people who share similar experiences with you in life is another way to, build that community. I think there's definitely community in individual sport, but more so in team sports, because you have to work together to achieve a greater goal. And you'll see that people who are trying to, whatever role they play, in a team of 12 on a softball team or in a basketball team, you might have 5 starters, but then you have 5 bench warmers. There might be another team of 10. You all play a role, and everybody's role is important, but in different ways, and realizing where you fit in and finding that your team becomes its own community within a community. So I think that why sports in particular does that for people, it's because you go through similar challenges as an athlete while you're trying to achieve a goal, whichever stage you're at, whether you're a young child learning to dribble, whether you're an advanced athlete, you've gone through a lot of struggles that other athletes would understand more so than maybe the general public. So you find commonalities, and that builds community. As far as Sisterhood softball and how it's built this community, I was saying earlier that, Sisterhood softball started 7 years ago. I was not playing softball at that time. I picked up the sport about 2 years ago. This is my third season in it. Now, it started out as a bunch of women getting together, about maybe 20, 25 women. Now it's expanded. In the West End, I think there's 12 teams. In the East End, there's 18. So there's 20 teams. And I look at I always knew this as somebody who's played from when I was 8, but like watching these women, some of these women are not showing up for the sport. The focus of a recreational league like Sisterhood Softball is that they're showing up for each other. They're showing up for that camaraderie. They're showing up for that community because they might not have that in other aspects of their life. And then when they're on the field, everybody is helping each other achieve a goal. So they buy into that. So they have a community within their team, and then they have a greater community because they're, like, for example, my sister-in-law plays on the league. So normally we compete together, but for Sisterhood Softball, we're an opposite team. So I love her, but I'm competing against her every Sunday, when I see her on the field. So because it's a draft system, the women come year after year. They get along with each other, but then they also play in their own respective teams, and they play on different teams, so you get to know everybody. Yeah. I hope that I answered all the questions.
Yeah, no, you did a great job, and yeah, talking about sort of the distinction, having a team, and then the sport broadly. Yeah, great piece, and how people come together. Ingrid, I'm going to turn to you. Here, so what we saw the clips and somewhat in the film, it feels a bit like you're out there on your own trying to bring about this change. But we've talked a little bit, and I know that there is in fact community behind this work. And so if you talk a little bit about that, what that looks like, how that helps you bring about the change that you're trying to drive.
Absolutely. When this all started, I didn't know if I was the only one that was annoyed and angry at the noise spikes I was hearing and getting woken up at 3:30 in the morning. So I reached out on Twitter, great old social media, and I learned that there's a community of noise haters out there. And I learned it's about leaf blowers, it's about sirens, it's about vehicles. There's a whole raft of issues out there. And what, as Daniela said in the clip there, we need a lot of unity to change the world. And to me, that unity is creating community. So I'm developing a community of people who care about their soundscape. I'm also educating people because many people don't know about the health impacts of noise, but also the benefits of creating a more inclusive and healthy and social city. The Tamarack Institute is a wealth of knowledge. Their whole mandate is about collaboration across silos and different groups. And they have a series called Collaborative Leadership and Governance. And I looked at that. I'll put a link to that in the chat because it was so informative for me, because it was about how you can create spaces for people and make sure that their voices are heard. They had a section on fear. And as a leader, I actually feel that fear. And it felt very validating. And it actually encouraged me to know that, again, I'm not alone in feeling fear in stepping out. And so this helped me park the fear and frame how I want to build this community to include the diverse relationships that people have to sound and noise. So I think when we're talking about reframing civic engagement, we need to reframe our relationship to fear and to recognize it, but to not let it hold us back. My whole thing is I'm not going to let perfection get in the way of progress. So I'm probably going to make mistakes and I may fall down, but I'm not going to let the fear of doing that hold me back from the progress. I need to believe, and people that are change makers need to believe that moving through the fear will be worth the changes that you make for the people and the communities that you are building.
Janelle, I don't imagine you can relate to ever feeling fear, and the stepping up on stage, but also building community. I mean, in the film, it comes across so beautifully, that community that you've been building, that you're part of, and I know that's been critical to your work. And you talk a little bit about that. In many ways, it's a very solitary act you're doing. I mean, literally a solitary act that you're doing up there. But there's also this sense of community that you build. So talk a little bit about how that has affected you and in the work, and and going back also to what you said, something right off the bat, that you were born political, right? That and so how that sort of feeds into your roots there.
For sure. Thank you, John. I also wanted to mention every time a clip played at the end, there was Bad Habits by Ed Sheeran. That's my favorite song. Yeah, thank you. I was all like, hey, someone has my playlist. But I actually have to take it back to humor is like our 8th sacred teaching. And everyone on my res, every Indigenous person in Canada is a comedian. We all poke fun, we all tease. However, we didn't always have the platform to do that openly for everyone to hear. And there's only a couple Indigenous comedians that are really big names out there. But there's the little guy, and those big name comedians don't do politics at all. They shy away from it because 30 years ago, for an Indigenous comedian to be political, they would have been shunned right away because Canada didn't want to hear it. However, I like to thank the Idle No More movement here in Ottawa for giving us permission, our own people, giving our own people permission to speak on the injustices that are happening, to have a voice. And then I grew out of the ashes. I'm like, me too. So I was like, okay, it's time to say something, but how can I do it in such a way that is captivating? And because I'm so political up there, I had to really internalize, why am I doing this? Some people say, oh, are you an activist? I'm like, yes, on stage, I'm an activist because the jester's only second to the king. And we're truth to the fore. Truth to power. That's it. Truth to power. Jester's only second to the king. I love to live by that motto because we are the pinnacle of free speech. Us comedians, we're the ones that are telling it like it is on stage, whether we're just joking around or whether we're sharing a message. So building this community is giving not just me a voice, but everybody. However, Indigenous people aren't a monolith, and I do not speak for every single nation that is in Canada. However, I do speak with the intent of changing the things that are plighting us all.
And in terms, I mean, I love this idea of course, truth to power, and in terms of your platforms, because there's two communities you're speaking with, right? There's white folks like myself, and Indigenous communities, and so are you speaking truth to both of those? And sort of, is it different? I mean, I guess is it different? Is it different pieces you're trying to get across?
Oh yeah, 100%. With the caucasity, I mean Caucasians of Canada, I'm just trying to let them know that we're still here and we have something to say, and we've been told to be humble and stay silent for too long. And a lot of times people come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, oh, wow. If one person didn't know, I guess 3 of you in the room didn't know, or 9 of you in the room didn't know. And when it comes to my Indigenous communities, sometimes it's just, oh, I can't believe she said that, but it needed to be said. So it's on both sides, 100%. So that's Idle No More just happened about I think 2017, 2018. So it's still people are still coming out of that funk of keeping quiet for the sake of others. And if anything, I am is not quiet.
Well, I want to encourage our audience here also not to be quiet, and to ask questions in the question box there. We're going to go to questions shortly from you, so please put those in. I'm sure you have questions you want to ask, and we'll make sure we get to those. But before we go there, this panel is, titled "Reframing Civic Engagement," right? So civic engagement, usually think about voting or running for office, but we're talking about sports, we're talking about comedy, we're talking about noise. Those aren't necessarily things we think about as civic engagement. But of course, we've already all discussed like how they are. But can you help us draw the link more explicitly, Misbah, from the sports and the work you're doing to the political or civic engagement? Like what's the linkage you see there?
John, why do you always make me go first?
Sorry.
Why can't I wait for the other answer?
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. No, that's fair enough. I'll take that back. Janelle, I know we talked about this already. I'll put you back on the spot here. Yeah.
Okay, civic engagement, eh? I don't know how to answer that question other than my last show I just had. It was a Just for Laughs showcase. Just for Laughs Town Scout was in the audience, and the Town Scouts, I was producing the show, it was Gotland, and the guy says, "Oh, Janelle, relax," because I was just running around everywhere. He's like, "Relax, you're just gonna have a good time." As he's saying relax, the Minister of Indigenous Services walks through the door, a chief, and the Senate of, a Mi'kmaq member of Parliament walked through the door. And I was like, whew, this is actual civic engagement. I was like, oh, Trudeau, are you next? Like, let's go. And I had to say my act, how raw, edgy, naughty it is in front of these big people. And all I could think was, this is exactly what I want. This is what I want to do. This is how I engage with the powers that be. So what civic engagement means for me is I'm doing it. I'm actively doing it every time I get on stage.
Ingrid, I mean, I think the connection for you is a little more straight, at least, as we saw in the film where you're showing up. But I think if you can talk about, like, how do you get the politicians in City Hall's attention? Like, how do you get them to pay attention to these issues?
Yeah, and I think I really like how each one of us and each one of the change makers has actually made it relatable to people. And if you don't make it relatable to people, then it won't work. I met with a counselor yesterday, and they want to know people's stories. But sometimes stories are just simply emotional. And around noise, it's been just like, I hate them, I hate this, I can't sleep at night. And it turns into this emotional argument that people end up just kind of going, I don't want to hear it. But when you start to talk about data is how good decisions are made. And we need to have good data in order to make good decisions. And that was probably one of my galvanizing points when I saw that people can, take their phone and submit a noise report and then see that data along with everybody else's data. That was powerful. And that's what I thought would be different, because how many times have we all submitted surveys, whether how was your shopping experience or how are you planning on voting, and you never actually see the results. So this was this regenerative piece of the civic engagement. And not everyone actually is willing to step out on stage or be different. And not everyone is willing to be a loudmouth like me. And so what I've learned is that we actually, in order to connect the political process and the community building, is that, at least for me in my place, I need to create a space for people who are not that comfortable to step into the political process in a way that is comfortable for them. So, and that's what I mean when I was saying people just need to show up, people need to do something. And that can look very different. That can be anything from liking a tweet, doing a noise report, voting is extremely important. And we've seen that there's this apathy about, around voting. And it's like, oh my goodness, people died for us in order to have the ability to vote. So I think that we need to have more voices come to the table. They need to be represented in a way that decision makers can understand, and that is quantifiable, but also qualitative as well. And so I think that we really also all need to believe that we have agency. One vote matters. One tweet matters. And in Janelle, I'm just going to pick on you here, but when you've got one person clapping in the room, other people clap in the room. And that is about that, creating that community and that political engagement.
Yeah. All right. Amazing. Misbah, to you now.
I think, John, you're going to have to repeat the question.
Oh, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. But well, so you know, sports, we don't think of necessarily sports as civic engagement, right? But to help us draw that connection between the sports and the work that you're doing and with Sisterhood softball, like what do you how do you see that as civic engagement and building community and building power in your community?
Okay, well, so I think that it's how you define so civic engagement by definition is just promoting the quality of life in a community. And it can be through political or non-political means. So in the realm of sport, it's through non-political means because you're coming together to do something collectively. With like a common goal, which is to play together and people from a similar community. And then, the whole summer you're trying to achieve this championship, Um, I think that sport, like I said, it teaches you a lot of things about yourself, and you have the ability to grow in sports. You learn a lot of skill sets from sports, which then you're able to apply in other aspects of your life. So through Sisterhood Softball, I know Sisterhood Softball does a lot of stuff in the community too. So they usually give back to the community throughout the year. When they had their annual tournament, all the money, all the teams who compete in the tournament, they fundraise, and that's given back into the community. The money is given back into the community towards a cause. Sometimes the cause has been like, for in the previous years, it's been like, women's shelters and battered women, so they do, like, the women come together to do good in the community as well, and they give back. And like during the years, even in the off season, they'll do fundraising activities, and they'll do activities, whether it's like going to, shelters. Sorry, my brain is like coming up empty, but I know they do work. Yeah. They come together to do a civic work too, like within the community, giving back to the community as well, not just playing the sport. And I feel like the definition of community by itself is just a group of people who have some commonality, right? So why can't sport be that, right? And as far as the work that I do within the community, I feel like maybe it has a little bit, it's not political, I would say, but I feel like, research backs that now, especially in 2023, that women or girls benefit from female leaders, having female leaders lead them in sport, because especially with the advent of a lot of the stuff that's happening within the community in the realm of sports, it's shown that girls drop out of sports disproportionately after the age of 12. I think 50% of youth girls drop out of sport. So to change that, there's been a lot of research done why that is. Why are girls dropping out at a much higher alarming rate than boys? So to target some of those things, one of the things is that having a sense of community, them feeling wanted, raising their self-esteem, them having leaders that look like them, female leaders leading them in sport. All these things will impact how they see themselves and help them stay in sport. So I feel like there's a movement towards funding that kind of programming and helping that come about.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that was great. Go on. Yeah, I mean, I think that's again returning to these themes of community and build, and then having solidarity, a sense of belonging. We know all of these are incredibly closely connected with taking a risk and putting stuff out for your community, whether it's building something like a sports league or doing something that's more like a policy change. But I don't see any questions yet coming to the question box, but please, folks, throw up your questions here. We will go to them, but I will ask another question. So what do you say to someone who tells you, oh, Ingrid, you are brave, you're smart, you're strong, you're funny, Janelle, like, you're a funny person. Like, that's not me. I could never do that. I can't be the kind of community leader that you're being. What do you say to them? Ingrid, start with you here.
Interesting question. I was actually on a call last night with a group of people, and we're all kind of advocates for safe streets, and we're interested in the election, and we were talking about how we're all involved, and we all get involved differently, and I think that's a matter of when I started this, I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know that I would end up going to City Hall and all this kind of stuff, and I also didn't know how my advocacy would show up. I think the thing is that people need to be authentic. They need to understand what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do, and at least start with what they're willing to do. And like I say, there's some really simple things to do, but every person who is leading an initiative needs support. So just showing up and supporting, attending events, being in the audience, showing up on a team, clapping for the group, all of that is just as important, because the people who are leading, we have fear. Things keep us up at night. I rewrite emails constantly because I was, how is somebody going to think about this? And what about that? So support those who are leading, but also I encourage people to try and find their place, because there is a spot. There's a spot for everyone to participate. It's just a matter of finding what's comfortable for you, get comfortable, and then maybe take the next step. And every journey starts with a single step. So just show up and get started.
I couldn't say it better than that. Jole, that's it in a nutshell. Like when people ask me, oh, you're so funny. I could never do that. I could never go on stage. I could never talk like that. I even had a comedian say, I can't do what you do on social media. You're posting all the time. And I looked at her, I'm like, it's because you have shame, eh? And she's like, yes, I have shame. And I'm like, yeah, I have no shame. I used to be homeless. I used to be on the street. I used to be downtrodden. I lost all my shame back then.
Wow.
Now I'm confident. And I know at any time, any place, it could all be taken away from me like that. So I live every moment with meaning. So when people tell me it's just that fear, that insecurity, that they lack a meaning, that they just need a little bit of direction. And if they see this confident woman and get inspired, boom, that's all I needed to do. That's all I need to do is help inspire others. But yes, anyone here who wants to ask a question, there is a Q&A there, or just pop it in the chat. We only have about like 10 more minutes. So if you have a question you're just dying to say, just throw it up in there.
Yeah. And Misbah, like you mentioned that a lot of the women who you've gotten involved in sports haven't been involved before. Like, how do you convince folks, like women, to say, oh, this is something you should try out? Like, what's your pitch?
I make it fun for them. I remind them, a lot of people don't know when they look at me that, I'm a mom and I juggle a lot of different things in my life, but I still take time out for myself. And for me, sport brings me a lot of joy. So I try to bring about that joy when they come up to our programming. And what we do for older women is that we actually give them a clinic. So we give them a clinic for the organization I run. We teach them how to play the sport. So if they've never had the opportunity to dribble a basketball, we'll give them weekly clinics on how to do the sport. And then they can also join in the mainstream, like, pick up basketball that we have, so they can play on both sides. And I have a huge rule within my programming. And I remind all of the other players, especially who play more competitively, that everybody should feel like they're wanted there. I never want anybody to walk through the door at whatever skill level, whatever capacity, whatever walk of life they're coming through, that they're not wanted there. So you have to try to pass the ball to them. You have to make them feel included, feel wanted. And I think that's the biggest thing to enter into a space where haven't traditionally been, is that you're accepted and feel wanted there. And I feel like if people show up and make you feel that way, I've had they show up for you week after week after week, and that's an extension of what they end up doing. Then they bring their daughters and other people into the programming, because I had a fun time. Like, you want to have a good time, and then it's kind of like that. So I think you have to make just like how you make it fun for young kids when they first pick up the sport, it's the same way for somebody who's never played the sport, to make it fun for them, make them feel wanted. So yeah.
And for you, in playing sports? Like, what brings you the most joy?
I like to compete.
Winning?
No, that's it. No, but
Win-
competing to win, I think, achieving a goal, whatever that is, I think that what winning looks like to me has changed over the years. It might have looked at for me when I was younger, might have been like, going all the way to the championship or whatever, or winning that game. But what it looks like for me now as somebody who's older, I still compete in tournaments and stuff with my teams. Just the whole journey is what makes it worthwhile for me. Putting in the work that I do, showing up for my teammates, the things that I get. I usually captain a lot of my teams or organize the different events. So the feedback that I get from the women, they really add fuel to my fire in the work that I do. When people appreciate it and it grows organically, it just makes my heart happy. But yeah, what my wins look like today are not the wins that they look like 20 years ago, for sure. But I still like to compete.
The competitive streak is still
Yeah.
strong. Yes,
It's
yeah.
still alive and well.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I will keep asking questions because I find you all fascinating people. So, I guess the other thing that you have all gone through, of course, is having these films made, and being part of that process, and then seeing them screened. I had the honor of being there when they were screened, for the world premiere at Hot Docs. And what was that like for you? Seeing the film screen, I know that these came together very quickly, amazing, productions, amazing editing, hours and hours of tape that are distilled to this story. Janelle, start with you, like to see, you're a performer, you're somebody who's, used to being on stage, but still film's different medium, different thing. This was a different, this was your very personal story.
I learned watching the documentary that I guess I'm serious about this. That's one of the things. But if I could take it back to when it was shot with the students, the grade 7 to grade 8, they came. Were you there for the early premiere, for the student premiere, John?
I unfortunately missed that.
So the student premiere, something magical happened. I got to talk to the kids, and I asked a question. I'm like, "Hey, has anybody here been called cringy?" And they're raising their hands. I'm like, "Me too." But it means you're an artist. There's something there, and people don't see it, and they want to, they shame things they don't understand. And I told myself prior to that day, that I'll never work with kids due to the nature of my material, because I can get a little dirty and a little naughty in my material, and I didn't want to subject kids to that. However, I realized I don't have to do my comedy. I don't have to say my comedy to the kids. I can just tell them how to speak, like how to become a public speaker, how to regulate your fight or flight mechanism, how I got out of homelessness as a child. I could just speak to them in that regard. So this documentary, if I didn't do it, I think I would never be able to speak to the children. So that's what I took from that.
Amazing. Ingrid, for you, what was it like?
When we were filming, I was amazed at the effort and care that Kat and the crew put into making the story being told. It changed the perceived value of what I'm doing and the impact it could have. And that was both with doing the pitch and then being selected, and then the filming. It was like, wow, there's people that are listening. Wow, this is amazing. I was also thrilled that Daniela, who has a day job, was willing to dedicate her time and project to share her story. And what that meant for me was that suddenly this wasn't about me. This wasn't about me getting woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was really about how raising the voices of people whose typically their stories hasn't been heard enough. And that is anybody who has had a brain injury, stroke, somebody who lives on an arterial road that can't regulate their heating and cooling, and in the summertime needs to open the window to go to sleep at night. Well, if we've got loud streets, those people aren't sleeping. So we're just adding barriers onto what these people are working with in every day of their life. So seeing this film and knowing and working with Daniela has helped me see my role in the bigger picture. I really didn't know that I could be the voice for so many. And being actually with the kids there that day was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed that experience too. So I'm looking forward to the educational component of Noise. It's going to be great.
Great. Ingrid, there just a quick follow-up question that has come through the Q&A from our audience. When the noise bylaws are reviewed by City Hall, what do you hope will be the main changes that they should consider or implement?
Yeah, so there are already suggestions from the city and from the councillors for that. And I think if I were to ask for one thing, right now there is a maximum decibel level for motorcycles, but there is not one for vehicles. So a vehicle can be as loud as it wants to be. Even though federally, when it comes off the line at manufacturing, it's tested for 85 decibels. As soon as that vehicle gets put on a truck and shipped off to a province, then it's provincial laws that take hold. And I'm honestly a little bit scared about what's going to happen with electric vehicles. Dodge wants to put out a vehicle that emits 126 decibels. That is really, really, really loud. So if anything, let's put caps on everything. And if I had my real wish, it would be that it would probably be 85 decibels measured for anything, for whatever it is, because above that, at 55 decibels, we have health impacts, but at 85 decibels, they are significant. So those are kind of like my couple of wish lists there. Let's put some maximums on these suckers.
Great. All right.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Misbah, you get the last question here about your experience being involved in the film. I know you were just one of the players in this, but you're part of the team, you're part of the group. How did it feel to see you and the team up there have this story told?
I think having the story told, having a voice is amazing. Originally, when Freya approached me, she said, I want to tie into the fact that you're a mom and you do other community work, and that's the role that I'm going to play with you, and I'm going to feature 2 other people from the organization. I'm like, oh, okay, and I remember telling you that, the sit-down interview alone, besides the hours and hours that she actually taped throughout the summer, was 2.5 hours. And to see the end product, the film is only 8 minutes. It's amazing how much emotion such a short film, and I felt a lot of the films were able to do that. How much storytelling could be done in 8 minutes, how much emotion could be evoked in 8 minutes, and I'm really grateful to have a small feature in that. I think my girls are really cute in it, and they were amazing. I think we took the takes super quickly with them, and I'm glad that they have a momentum like that. But also, I'm so happy for the director and her ability to, get the story out there. And I know that a lot of the women who play in the league, and there's 144 women, and on our end, I know that they've watched the film many times, and they've shared their feelings with it, and they feel seen, they feel appreciated, and they feel that, the film captured all the emotion that it evokes for them every Sunday when they show up. So.
That is a great note to end on, because if you haven't seen the films, see them. If you have seen the films, tell all your friends, spread the words to your communities, support this kind of storytelling, this kind of filmmaking. Thank you all for being part of this. I will turn it over to Jackie here to close us out.
Echoing the thanks. What an enriching and an interesting hour with you all. Thank you, John, for hosting. Thank you so much, Misbah, Janelle, and Ingrid, for taking time out of your very busy change-making schedules to share your wisdom and advice and your insights. Hugely appreciated. Thanks to all of you in the audience for taking time out of your day to join us. Please, if you haven't already, watch the Citizen Minutes films on citizenminutes.ca and consider using them in your work and in your communities. They're excellent tools, and they're excellent tools. We've seen that proven time and time again. And on behalf of Hot Docs, that's a wrap. Thank you so much. Have a great day.